kotse patungo sa isang sidewalk sa Romania.
Nakaligtas kaya ang mga taong naglalakad sa sidewalk at anong nangyari sa mga lulan ng sasakyan? Aalamin po natin yan mula sa mga detalye ng balitang ibabahagi maya-maya. Magandang gabi, ako po si Ricky Matay.
Ako si Nina Richie Alago Flores. Ito ang mata ng Agila International para naman sa mga headlines ngayong Miyerkules ng gabi.
Philippine Embassy sa Tel Aviv, pinag-iingat ang mga Pilipino sa Israel kasunod ng pag-atake ng Iran.
Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. pirmado na ang Value-Added Tax on Digital Services Law.
Iran nagsagawa ng malawakang airstrike laban sa Israel.
Magnitude 6.8 earthquake tumama sa Tonga.
At double Olympic gold medalist Carlos Yulo, isa ng Philippine Navy reservist. Pinag-iingat ng Philippine Embassy sa Tel Aviv ang local Filipino community sa Israel matapos ang pag-atake doon ng Iran.
Pinayuhan ng embahada na magtungo ang mga Filipino community sa protected spaces, partikular na sa mga bomb shelters at tumalima sa mga alituntuning pinatutupad ng Home Front Command. Samantala, maantala naman ang umiiral na repatriation ng mga overseas Filipino workers sa Lebanon dahil sa lumalalang kaguluhan sa nasabing bansa. Ayon sa Department of Migrant Workers o DMW, kanselado na ang mga outbound flights sa mga paliparan doon dahil sa mga pagsabog sa Beirut. Kasama sa mga naantalang biyahe ang flight ng 15 OFWs na dapat sana'y nakaalis na noong Setyembre 25 mula sa Lebanon. Inaasikaso naman ang Migrant Workers Office sa Beirut ang repatriation ng 63 OFWs na may kumpletong papeles at clearances para makaalis na sa Lebanon. Sa pinakahuling tala ng DMW, maabot na sa 430 OFWs at 28 dependents mula sa Lebanon ang napauwi na sa bansa.
Bantay sarado ng Manila Economic and Cultural Office o MECO ang sitwasyon ng mga Pilipino sa Taiwan dahil sa pagtama roon ng bagyong Julian. Sinabi ni MECO Chairperson Cheloy Garafil na wala pang naiulat na insidente na kinasasangkutan ng mga Pinoy sa Taiwan. Anya, nakikipag-ugnayan na ang MECO sa migrant workers offices sa Taipei, Taichung at Kaohsiung para sumaklolo sa mga Pilipinong nangangailangan ng tulong. Ayon sa projection ng weather station sa Taipei, inaasahang tatama ang bagyo sa Taiwan ngayong Miyerkules ng hapon o Huwebes ng umaga.
Pirmado na ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ang Value-Added Tax on Digital Services Law na naglalayong itaas ang level ng digital landscape sa Pilipinas.
With this law, we say that if your presence in the Philippine market is as real as your profits, then your tax responsibility should also be equally tangible.
Ataw ng 12% VAT sa mga non-resident digital service providers para maging karagdagang kita ng gobyerno. Saklaw ng batas na ito ang iba't ibang mga serbisyo katulad ng mga online search engines, online marketplaces, cloud services, online media and advertising, online platforms, and digital goods. Layo ng batas na ito na buwisan ang mga dayuhang kumpanyang hindi nakabase sa bansa na patuloy na nagbibigay ng serbisyo sa mga Pilipinong mamimili. Kabilang sa mga ito ang Google, YouTube, Netflix, Amazon, Spotify, Lazada at iba pa. Gate naman ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. inaasahang makalipas ng 5 taon ay makakakolekta ang pamahalaan ng 105 billion pesos mula sa nasabing batas. Samantala, ang 5% ng revenue nito ay ilalaan sa creative industries habang ang nalalabing halaga ay gagamitin sa pagpapatayo ng silid-aralan, rural health units at mga farm-to-market road projects.
Patay ang 8 katao habang isa naman ang nawawala sa pananalasa ng bagyong Julian sa hilagang bahagi ng Pilipinas. Ayon po yan sa National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council o NDRRMC. Batay sa situation report ng ahensya, ang 8 naitalang nasawi ay mula sa Region 2 o Cagayan Valley at ang isang nawawala naman ay mula sa Cordillera Administrative Region o CAR. Samantala, nasa 43,093 families mula sa Region 1, 2 at CAR ang apektado ng bagyo, kung saan 2,178 na katao ang tumutuloy sa 58 evacuation centers at 921 na pamilya naman ang nasa ibang lugar.
Tinawag ni irresponsible, dangerous at provocative ng National Maritime Council o NMC ang ginawang pagtutok ng People's Liberation Army Navy ng laser sa Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources o BFAR aircraft sa West Philippine Sea. Tinukoy ni NMC spokesperson Undersecretary Alexander Lopez na hindi palalampasin ng Pilipinas ang nasabing insidente. Anya, malinaw na ito ay isang gross violation ng international laws at ng United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea o UNCLOS. Ayon kay Lopez, ay magbibigay ang NMC ng report sa Department of Foreign Affairs para sa wastong diplomatic action sa issue. Giit ni Lopez, ang ginawang pagpapatama ng laser sa BFAR aircraft ay posibleng magdulot ng pansamantalang pagkabulag sa piloto sa cockpit na maaaring maging mitsa pa sa buhay ng mga saklay o sakay ng eroplano.
Niyanig na malakas na magnitude 6.1 na lindol kanina umaga ang Bicol Region at isang bayan sa Samar, ayon po yan sa ulat ng PHIVOLCS. Kung kaya, paalala ng PHIVOLCS, asahan na ang mga aftershock sa mga nabanggit na lugar. Tinukoy ng ahensya na natagpuan ang epicenter ng lindol sa silangang bahagi ng baybayin ng Bagamono, Catanduanes, bandang 5:19 ng umaga na may lalim na 38 kilometro. Naramdaman ng Intensity 1 sa Irosin, Sorsogon, Intensity 4 sa Virac, Catanduanes at Tabaco City, Albay. Intensity 3 naman po sa Mercedes, Camarines Norte, gayon din sa Caramuan at sa Camarines Sur at Sorsogon City sa may Sorsogon. Naitala ang Intensity 2 sa General Nacar, Quezon, Legazpi City, Albay, Daet, Camarines Norte, Iriga City, Ragay at Sipocot sa Camarines Sur at San Roque, Northern Samar, habang Intensity 1 sa Jose Panganiban, Camarines Norte, Claveria, Masbate, Bulusan, Sorsogon at Gandaras, Samar.
Nagbitiw ng pahayag si Philippine National Police o PNP Chief Francisco Marbil na hindi magtatagal ay mahuhuli na ng tracking team si dating presidential spokesperson attorney Harry Roque Jr. Kinumpirma ni Marbil na may matibay na lead ang PNP ukol sa lugar na pinagtataguan ni Roque. Anya, masusing sinusubaybayan ng tracking team ang galaw ng abogado at naghihintay lamang ito ng tamang oras at pagkakataon upang isagawa ang pagsisilbi ng arrest order. Sinabi rin ni Marbil na iginagalang ng pulisya ang karapatan ni Attorney Roque na magsalita, ngunit pinaalalahanan din niya ang dating opisyal na irespeto nito ang mandato ng PNP. Matatandaan na binalaan ni PNP spokesperson Colonel Jean Fajardo ang mga magkakanlong kay Roque at sinabi pa nito na nahaharap ang mga ito sa asunto kung napatunayan na may kinalaman sila sa pagtatago kay Attorney Roque. Si Roque ay ilang linggo nang hinahanap ng pulisya matapos i-contempt at isyuhan ng warrant of arrest ng House Quad Committee dahil sa posibleng kaugnayan nito sa illegal na operasyon ng Pogo sa Pilipinas. Susunod, isang Vietnam fishing boat inatake sa gitna ng West Philippine Sea.
Russia naglunsad ng emergency public warning test.
Yan at iba pang mga balita sa pagbabalik ng Mata ng Agila International.
This portion. pasasalamat sa inyo mga ka-NET25 dahil umabot ng 1 milyon ng mga subscriber ng NET25 YouTube channel. Let's subscribe together here on NET25.
Sa kasulukuyang henerasyon, marami na ang nag-viral. Dahil po yan sa kanilang ginagawang pagtulong sa kapwa. Pero mas marami ang tumutulong kahit walang nakakakita. Kaya naman kung ikaw ay may kilala na grupo o individual na may natatanging pagresponde sa lipunan at maging sa kalikasan, mag-text lamang sa 0915-415-1035 o mag-email sa responde@net25.com at magpadala ng mensahe sa ating Facebook page at NET25 TV. Baka kayo na ang susunod nating Certified Key Responder.
Let's net together sa NET25. Sa NET25.
Iniulat ng bagong Prime Minister ng Japan ang isang ideya tungkol sa pagkakaroon ng Asian NATO na maaaring makatulong sa lumalaking presensya ng militar ng China sa rehiyon. Ayon kay Takeshi Iwaya na bagong Foreign Minister ng Japan, isa lamang ito sa mga posibleng hakbang upang makabuo na multi-layered network ng mga bansa at palakasin ang regional deterrence. Gayunpaman, maraming mga bansa sa Asia katulad ng India ang nagpahayag ng pag-aalinlangan sa panawagang ito ni Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. Iminungkahi rin ni Ishiba na dapat mapabilang ang Estados Unidos sa isang Asian NATO. Subalit, tahimik na binabaliwala ng US ang nasabing ideya. At ayon sa US Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia, masyado pang maaga para sa mga ganitong pag-uusap.
Iniulat ng Vietnamese state media ang pag-atake na nangyari umano sa isang Vietnamese fishing boat habang ito ay nasa katubigan ng West Philippine Sea. Batay sa report, 10 crew ng naturang bangka ang nasaktan. 3 sa kanila ay nabalian ng mga kamay at paa. Lumalabas sa report na naglalayag ang naturang bangka malapit sa Paracel Islands na mangyari ang pag-atake. Gayunpaman, hindi pa natutukoy kung sino ang may kagagawan sa naturang pag-atake. Ang Paracel Islands ay may layong 400 kilometers mula sa silangan ng Vietnam. Kapareho rin ang distansya nito mula sa pinakamalapit na dalampasigan ng China. Ang dalawang bansa ay kapwa may claims sa naturang maritime feature, ngunit ang China ang mayroong kontrol dito. Sa kasalukuyan ay wala pang inilabas na opisyal na pahayag ang Vietnam at China ukol sa insidente. Ang naturang maritime feature ay dati ng pinag-awayan ng dalawang bansa kung saan noong 1970 ay nagkaroon ng naval conflict sa pagitan ng mga ito na naging daan para tuluyan itong makuha ng China. Sa kasalukuyan, mayroong maliit na puerto ang China sa naturang lugar kasama na ang ilang mga buildings, helipad at radar.
Ihahanda ng Russia ang kanilang 2 beses kada isang taong emergency warning test sa publiko ngayong Miyerkules. Ayon sa Emergency Ministry ng Russia, pagsapit ng umaga ay tutunog ang mga sirena ng 1 minuto at maririnig ito sa mga loudspeakers at maririnig ang isang sigaw na "Attention everyone." Layunin ng pagsasanay na ito na suriin ang mga warning systems sa Russia at tsakin ang kahandaan ng kanilang publiko. Layon din ng emergency warning tests na itaas ang public awareness maging ang responsableng pagsasagawa nito para sa kaligtasan ng mga mamamayan sa Russia. Unang isinagawa ng Russia ang emergency public warning test noong taong 2020.
Nanumpa na si former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte bilang bagong Secretary General ng NATO matapos ang 10 taong termino ni Jens Stoltenberg.
Dear Mark, please receive this special gavel and let me invite you to take the seat of the chair of the North Atlantic Council.
Sa Ang special session ng North Atlantic Council na ginanap sa NATO headquarters sa Brussels ay formal nang inendorso ni Stoltenberg si Rota bilang kanyang kapalit sa posisyon. Pinuri ni Stoltenberg ang striktong pagsunod ni Rota sa mga pulisiyang inihain ng kanyang administrasyon at ang abilidad niyang makipagnegosasyon. Ipinagmalaki rin ni Stoltenberg ang kanyang tagapagmana na hindi ikompromiso ang kanyang prinsipyo at paninindigan.
Dear Jens, we are going to miss your profound wisdom, cool head, and the dry sense of humor. Please be kind to us in your book on NATO.
Sa kanyang unang sesyon bilang pinuno ng NATO ay binigyang importansya ni Rota ang tatlong pangunahing hangarin niya para sa organisasyon. Una, ang pagpapanatili sa katatagan at kalakasan ng NATO sa harap ng anumang banta. Pangalawang, pagpapatuloy ng suporta para sa Ukraine na tuluyan na itong maging kasapi ng naturang organisasyon. At ang pangatlo, ang pagpapalakas ng mga partnerships ng NATO sa iba pang kaakibat ng mga organisasyon.
My second priority is to step up our support for Ukraine and bring it ever closer to NATO. Because there can be no lasting security in Europe without a strong, independent Ukraine. I know from personal experience with the downing of flight MH17 in 2014 how conflict in Ukraine is not contained to the front lines. So we must do our part.
Pinapressure ngayon ng European Union o EU si UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer na maging bukas sa isang youth mobility scheme. Ang Youth Mobility Scheme ay isang panukala kung saan ang mga mag-aaral na mula sa ibang member states ng EU ay maaaring manirahan at makapag-aral sa United Kingdom. Pinapayagan din ito ang mga kabataang galing naman sa United Kingdom na manirahan at mag-aral sa mga miyembro ng EU. Mariing tinatanggihan po kasi ni Starmer ang planong ito ayon sa ilang analysts. Ang posibleng dahilan ng pag-ayaw ni Starmer ay dahil sa Brexit. Subalit, binigyan diin ng ilang matataas na politiko ng EU na top priority nila na isulong ang Youth Mobility Scheme at nais silang tanggapin ito ni Starmer. Obserbasyon ng mga analysts ay napakahalaga ng unang bilateral meeting ni Starmer at European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen na naganap ngayong araw. Dahil dito lamang magkakaroon ng linaw kung magiging bukas nga ba ang United Kingdom sa Youth Mobility Scheme ng EU.
Sa Estados Unidos, nagbabala ang isang transportation economist na kung magtatagal ang strike ng port workers sa East Coast at Gulf Coast, magkakaroon ito ng malaking epekto sa inflation at national security sa bansa. Alamin natin ang detalye mula kay Jane Kathleen Gregorio.
Noong Martes, nagsimula ang unang malaking strike sa loob ng 50 taon ng US East Coast at Gulf Coast dock workers. Dahil dito, huminto ang daloy ng halos kalahati ng ocean shipping sa bansa. Ito ay matapos mabigo ang isang negosasyon para sa panibagong labor contract dahil sa issue ng pasahod. Hinaharangan ng strike ang maraming bagay mula sa shipment ng pagkain hanggang sasakyan sa 12-dosenang ports mula Maine hanggang Texas. Nagbabala ang disruption analyst na dahil dito, mananagot ang ekonomiya ng bilyon-bilyong dolyar kada araw, babantaan ang mga trabaho at malamang ay palalain ang inflation. Ayon kay transportation economist Walter Kremzis, kung magtatagal ang strike, tatamaan ng husto ang lagay ng inflation sa bansa.
The longer it lasts, the more extreme the measures will have to be in order to adapt to the circumstances. And the costs will escalate significantly. We could see an impact on inflation. You know, if the strike were to last more than a month, you would see inflation ticking up. And if it goes 2 months, you'd see it ticking up a lot. You know, a lot of companies would try to absorb the higher costs, but at some point, they have to pass the cost on or go bankrupt. You know, and we saw a lot of bankruptcies during the COVID period. As a lot of companies couldn't pass the costs on.
Nagbabala sa Kremzis ukol sa dalawang pinsalang maaaring idulot kung magtatagal ang strike. Isa ay political at isa pa ay issue ng seguridad ng bansa.
So the longer the strike lasts, the two risks come out of it. One of them is political. because there will be an increasing impact on inflation as well as on employment. Some industries, the workers will sit around languishing, and going into an election, that's not a good thing for at least one of the parties. The other part is that if we start running low of inventories of critical goods, especially related to medicine, then we have a national security issue.
Kumakatawan sa 45,000 port workers ang International Longshoresmen Association Union. Nakikipagnegosasyon ito sa United States Maritime Alliance Employer Group para sa bagong 6 na taong kontrato bago ang deadline nitong noong 30 ng Setyembre. Noong Martes, may 38 container vessels ang nakaantabay sa US ports kumpara sa 3 lamang noong linggo. Ayon kay Kemsies, kung ang laman ng mga ito ay pagkain, makakaramdam ang mga mamayan ng malaking epekto, lalo na anya sa mga darating na buwan kung saan mas maraming mga tao ang namimili.
Technology and food, that's short shelf life. And so, once those goods get stuck waiting on ships and the supplies in the U.S. run out, you are going to see an impact on consumers. If you're looking at products that are lower value and have a much longer shelf life, well, that everybody can afford to wait. Kind of like furniture during the COVID pandemic. The impacts are very localized at this point to the maritime transportation industry. What we are seeing is that some ships are getting stuck waiting outside the ports. This is a busy time of the year. We've got the fourth quarter shopping season, the holiday shopping season. And we need to send the containers back to Asia so they can be filled with goods to bring them back to North America.
Samantala, ayon kay White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre, karapatan ng dock workers ang tumanggap ng patas ng sahod. Anya, collective bargaining ang sagot sa suliraning ito.
We believe it is important that workers get a fair pay and also benefits. That's what they deserve. I just laid out what the shippers were able to do. Right, they were able to regain their profits. Some of it in excess of 800% since the pandemic. Right, executive compensation has grown in line with those profits, and profits have been returned to shareholders at record rates. And so, the ILA, these workers deserve to get paid what they're worth. They deserve that. They put their lives at risk during, they worked, they had to work during the pandemic to keep ports open. That was not an easy thing to do. They put themselves at risk, and so now they deserve fair wages. What we believe is that they should get their fair wages and benefits, just like their peers, and so we believe that collective bargaining is the way to go. Both sides need to continue to have conversation and do that in obviously in a way that leads to a way that workers get their fair share.
Jane Kathleen Gregorio para sa mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Itinanggi ng hepe ng United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency o UNRWA na alam nitong isang Hamas commander sa Lebanon ang isa sa mga suspendidong empleyado ng ahensya. Chantal Santos po para sa balita.
Noong Lunes, sinabi ni UNRWA Chief Philippe Lazzarini na hindi nito alam ng empleyadong si Fateh Sharif Abu Elamin ay isang Hamas commander sa Lebanon. Samantala, noong Lunes, napatay ang leader ng Hamas Lebanon branch na si Abu Elamin kasama ang mga kapamilya nito sa isang Israeli strike sa southern Lebanon. Ayon kay Lazzarini, nasuspende si Elamin sa trabaho nito sa UNRWA noong Marso matapos ang akusasyon ukol sa politika nito.
The specific allegation at that time was that he is a part of the local leadership. Commander never appear. I never heard the word commander before you ask me or before statement coming out today. So that was not the part of the allegation.
Ipinagtanggol ni Lazzarini ang kawalang alam nito ukol kay Elamin. Anya, bilang ahensya laan sa pangkatauhan, wala itong kapasidad para sa serbisyong intelihensya. Anya, kung ano ang kitang-kita ngayon ay maaaring hindi nakita kahapon.
We do not have, as a human development agency, a police capacity, intelligence services, but what we do, we share the names. We always share the names. And the case you are raising right now here is certainly the case which was the best known in Beirut, where all the embassy, authorities, faction, everybody knew that this person has been suspended, this person was under investigation, meaning also that if it was such of a common knowledge, how come no one would have told us this? So I think what's obvious for you today was not obvious yesterday.
Nanawagan rin si Lazzarini sa member states na umalma laban sa pag-atake ng Israel sa ahensya. Ilang taon nang isinusulong ni Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu na kalasin ng UNRWA dahil anya sa pang-uudyok nito laban sa Israel. Ang UNRWA o United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East ay binuo noong 1949 upang tumulong sa Palestinian refugees sa gitnang silangan. Kasama rito ang Lebanon kung saan may naninirahang 250,000. Ayon kay Lazzarini, ginagamit nito ang shelters ng Palestinian refugees para sa 1 milyong mga tao na nailikas sa Lebanon matapos ang 2 linggong pag-atake ng Israel sa Hezbollah. Chantal Santos para sa mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Nagsagawa ng isang large-scale airstrike ang Iran kung saan nagpakawala sila ng halos 200 missiles patungo sa teritoryo ng Israel. Kasabay ng pagpapalipad ng kanilang bagong rocket na Fatah hypersonic ballistic missile ang isang large-scale cyber attack. Ayon sa Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, nagdesisyon silang magsagawa ng large-scale operation laban sa Israel bilang paghihiganti sa mapanganib na Israeli airstrikes laban sa mga mamamayan ng Gaza at Lebanon. Pati na rin ang pagpatay ng Israeli military sa mga leader ng Hamas, Hezbollah at IRGC. Sa pahayag na inilabas ng Iran, nakatuon ang airstrike ng Iran na asintahin ang mga vital military and security targets sa loob ng Israel, kung saan 3 dito ay mahahanap sa Tel Aviv. Nagsanib puwersa ang mga naval destroyers ng Estados Unidos at Iron Dome defense system ng Israel upang mapigilan ang mas malawak na pinsalang posibleng maidulot nito. Base naman sa pahayag ng Israeli Defense Force, iilang lugar lamang sa gitna at timog na parte ng Israel ang natamaan habang may 2 lamang na tao ang napinsala dahil sa nahuhulog na debris.
انا من المجرمین منتقمون امت بزرگ اسلامی ملت شریف و شهید پرور ایران لحظاتی قبل و پس از یک دور خویشتن‌داری در برابر نقض حاکمیت جمهوری اسلامی ایران در ترور مجاهد شهید دکتر اسماعیل هنیه توسط رژیم صهیونیستی و برابر حق کشور در دفاع مشروع از خود برابر منشور ملل متحد و تشدید شرارت‌های رژیم با حمایت آمریکا در قتل عام مردم لبنان و غزه و به شهادت رساندن مجاهد کبیر رهبر محور مقاومت و دبیر کل سرافراز حزب الله سید حسن نصرالله و شهادت فرمانده رشید و مستشار عالی سپاه پاسداران در لبنان سرلشکر پاسدار عباس نیلفروشان نیروی هوافضای سپاه با پرتاب 10 موشک بالستیک اهداف مهم نظامی امنیتی را در قلب سرزمین‌های اشغالی مورد هدف قرار داد که جزئیات آن متعاقباً به استحضار خواهد رسید. خاطرنشان می‌سازد این عملیات با تصویب شورای عالی امنیت ملی و ابلاغ ستاد کل نیروهای مسلح و حمایت و پشتیبانی ارتش جمهوری اسلامی ایران و وزارت دفاع صورت گرفته است. اخطار داده می‌شود چنانچه رژیم صهیونی به این عملیات که منطبق بر حقوق قانونی کشور و قوانین بین المللی است واکنش نظامی نشان دهد با حملات کوبنده و ویرانگر بعدی مواجه خواهد شد. و من نصر الا من عند الله العزیز الحکیم روابط عمومی سپاه پاسداران انقلاب اسلامی.
Nangako si Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu na pagbabayaran ng Iran ang kanilang isinagawang pag-atake. Sumagot naman ang Iran na ang kahit anong pag-alma ng Israel ay magdudulot ng malawakang pagwasak ng kanilang bansa sa kamay ng Tehran. Dagdag pa ng Iran Armed Forces na ang kahit anong paghihimasok na gagawin ng mga kaalyadong bansa ay posibleng maghimok ng mas malaking gulo base sa interes ng rehiyon. Nababahala naman ngayon ang US sa posibilidad na lumaki ang naturang giyera sa lugar dahil sa ginagawang ground operations ng Israel sa Lebanon.
איראן עשתה הערב טעות גדולה, והיא תשלם על כך. המשטר באיראן לא מבין את נחישותנו להגן על עצמנו ואת נחישותנו לגמול לאויבינו. סינואר ודף לא הבינו זאת, נסראללה ומוחסן לא הבינו זאת, וכנראה יש בטהרן אלה שלא מבינים זאת. הם יבינו. נעמוד בכלל שקבענו. מי שתוקף אותנו, אנחנו תוקפים אותו.
Nagharap ang mga kandidato para sa pagka-vice-presidente na sina Republican J.D. Vance at Democrat Tim Walz sa isang debate ilang linggo bago ang eleksyon sa Estados Unidos. Ilan sa mga mahahalagang isyong kanilang pinagdebatehan ay ang Middle East, immigration, healthcare at gun violence. Narito pang report ni Thomas I. Likeness.
The debate was largely cordial and focused on policy, unlike the encounter between Trump and Harris a few weeks ago. There were no personal attacks and insults. The debate opened with a question about the Middle East. Walz responded, saying Harris would continue the stable leadership of the Biden administration.
But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous.
Vance insisted Trump delivered stability in the region, saying in those days, foreign agents were afraid of Trump and afraid of stepping out of line. Vance also targeted immigrants as being the cause of most of the country's problems.
In Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed, you've got hospitals that are overwhelmed, you've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim, and I actually think, I agree with you, I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Vance continuously implied that Harris, as vice president, has been a primary decision maker in the White House on issues such as immigration and the war in Gaza. At one point, he referred to the administration of Kamala Harris, and later he referred to when Harris came into office. On the issue of gun control, Vance seemed to reject any stricter measures on firearms ownership to deal with the problem of school shootings.
We have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer.
Walz says that's not the way to go. He says he'd like to see red flag laws and a ban on assault-style weapons instead.
Do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix.
Vance sidestepped a question on whether he believes former President Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Instead, he questioned Harris's actions regarding free speech during the pandemic. Whether this debate will change the minds of voters is anyone's guess, but for those who stayed with the 2-hour program, it gave them a side-by-side look at the understudies in the presidential election. Thomas I. Likeness from Atanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Hello, Thomas. We'd just like to know, what is your take on the debate? Do you think it actually changed anyone's mind? Thomas?
Well, first of all, my opinion of it, much better than the presidential debate when it comes to content. Now, this 2-hour talk fest focused on policy. It lacked the drama and personal insults that you saw in the Harris-Trump encounter. Now, for a political groupie like me, that's good. But whether the majority of viewers hung on until the end, well, the ratings numbers are not out yet. Now, did it change anybody's mind? That's hard to say. Both Walz and Vance played to their core supporters. Walz may have, though, picked up some of the undecideds, and that's because of his folksy, neighborly style. You know, the style of the two candidates couldn't be any more different. Vance is a Yale-educated lawyer, and he's got a very slick, smooth speaking style. But you don't seem to get a connection to him. Walz, though, he's a former high school teacher. He's now the governor of Minnesota, been elected twice there as governor, and he sounds like the kind of neighbor everyone wishes they had. You know, maybe to some, he's like the teacher or the football coach they had.
So, Thomas, what about the message that the two candidates brought to the debate? How do you think they differed?
Well, there's certainly a study in contrasts. We talked about their difference in speaking style and connecting with people a moment ago. But when it came to answering questions put to them by the moderators, it seemed like J.D. Vance was in a game of verbal dodgeball much of the time. He evaded questions. He would pivot to his usual themes. One of them, well, Harris has been vice president for 3.5 years, so why hasn't she fixed these problems? He seems to forget that it's Joe Biden in the presidential chair, not Kamala Harris. His other go-to theme is that most of America's problems are caused by immigrants, and he didn't let up on that. He also vigorously defended Trump's record as president, but you didn't get a lot of answers from him. Now, Walz doesn't have Vance's smooth delivery, but he scored points on issues such as the economy, climate change, healthcare, and he did this by offering solutions. But in the end, this debate will likely have little effect on the election. Voters are going to be focused on the names at the top of the tickets, namely Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your very interesting and informative report. Reporting from our U.S. News Bureau. Susunod, 45 migrante sa Djibouti patay matapos lumubog ang mga barko.
Annular solar eclipse mamamataan sa Southern Hemisphere ngayong Oktubre at 2.
At Rosé ng Blackpink maglalabas ng kauna-unahang album sa Disyembre. Mga detalye ng mga balita niyan at iba pa sa pagbabalik na mata ng Agila International.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa new era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Agapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
This
Ginunita ng China ang ika-75 taon ng pamumuno ng Partidong Komunista. Walang magarbong pagdiriwang para sa okasyong ito maliban sa isang seremonya kung saan itinaas ang pambansang watawat sa Tiananmen Square at nagmarcha ang mga honor guard mula sa palasyo na nagsilbing tahanan ng mga dating emperador ng China. Mahigit 3 dekada matapos ang pagbagsak ng Soviet Union, nananatiling matatag ang kapangyarihan ng Chinese Communist Party. Napagtagumpayan ng partido ang mga taon ng kaguluhang bunsod ng sarili nitong mga polisiya matapos itong makuha ang kontrol taong 1949. Taong 1978, isang malaking pagbabago ng direksyon ang nagpatibay sa China bilang isang dambuhala sa aspeto ng industriya na ngayon ay may ekonomiyang pumapangalawa sa Estados Unidos. Sa kasalukuyan, nais ng mga pinuno ng partido na lalong paigtingin pa ang kapangyarihan ng bansa upang makamit ang tinatawag nilang rejuvenation sa 2049, taon ng pagdiriwang ng ika-100 pamumuno o ika-100 taong pamumuno ng partido. Gayunpaman, ang kanilang pananatili sa kapangyarihan ay nakasalalay sa kung paano nila haharapin ang mga hamong gaya ng mabagal na paglago ng ekonomiya at ng tumitinding kompetisyon mula sa Estados Unidos kung saan ay nakaamba ang posibilidad ng isang bagong Cold War. Talakayin natin ang kasaysayan ng Chinese Communist Party at ang tagapagtatag nitong si Mao Zedong. Matapos ang Russian Revolution noong 1917, kumuha ng inspirasyon ang mga revolusyonaryo sa China upang magtatag ng sarili nilang partido na tinawag nilang Chinese Communist Party o CCP. Itinatag ito noong 1921 nina Li Dajiao, Chen Dixiu at Mao Zedong na mas kinikilala bilang founder ng partido. Pagsapit ng 1924, nakipagsanib puwersa ang CCP sa Nationalist Party na nasa ilalim naman ng pamumuno ni Sun Yat-sen. Si Mao Zedong ay isa sa mga unang komunista na sumali sa Nationalist Party at nagtrabaho rito. Siya ang naging pansamantalang pinuno ng sangay ng propaganda ng Nationalist Party at ang may akda ng pangunahing pahayagan nito, ang Political Weekly. Ngunit nang mamatay si Sun Yat-sen taong 1925, pinalitan siya ni Chiang Kai-shek bilang leader ng mga nasyonalista at nagsagawa ito ng purge o yung sapilitang pagsibak sa mga komunista. Pinatalsik ng kilusang itong CCP mula sa Shanghai na siyang nagtulak sa mga kasapi nito upang magtago. Maraming mga komunista ang tumigil sa kanilang revolusyonaryong mga aktibidad sa mga lungsod at nagtungo sa mga probinsya kung saan naging matagumpay sila sa paghimok ng suporta mula sa mga magsasaka. Noong 1936, napilitang ipahinto ni Chiang ang kanyang kampanyang militar laban sa CCP at sa halip ay bumuo ng isang United Front upang labanan ang nooy papalakas na agresyon ng militar ng Japan. Kung naging tradisyonal ang taktika ng mga nationalist sa labang ito, guerrilla warfare naman ang pinairal ng mga komunista. Dahil sa kakaibang taktikang ito at sa pagdami na rin ng bilang ng mga kasapi ng CCP matapos silang himuking lumahok ang mga may hirap na Chinese, lumabas na higit silang malakas sa laban kaysa sa Nationalist Party. Pagkatapos ng World War II, muling sumiklab ang Civil War taong 1946 at noong 1949, lubusang natalo ng mga communist ang mga nationalist na napilitan namang lumikas patungong Taiwan. Si Mao Zedong ay nangibabaw bilang pinakamataas na leader sa panahong ito at naging chairman ng People's Republic of China na itinatag ng CCP at ng mga kaalyado nito. Sinimulan niya at ng iba pang mga pinuno ng partido ang pagbabago sa lipunan ng China. Ilan sa mga unang hakbang ay ang pagsasailalim ng mga industriya sa kontrol ng Estado at ang pag-organisa sa mga magsasaka sa ilalim ng mga collective. Samantala, gumamit ng karahasan ang partido upang pigilan naman ang mga oposisyon. Noong 1958, sa pagtatangkang makabuo ng isang mas Chinese na imahe ng komunismo, inilunsad ni Mao ang tinawag niyang Great Leap Forward. Layunin nito ang malawakang mobilisasyon ng labor upang pataasin ang produksyong agrikultural at industrial. Ngunit nagbunga ito ng isang malaking pagbaba sa produksyon ng agrikultura na sinamahan pa ng mga kakulangan sa pagsasaka na siyang nagdulot naman ng taggutom at pagkasawi ng milyon-milyong katao. Kaagad na inabandona ang polisiya na nagdulot ng paghina ng posisyon ni Mao Zedong sa partido. Upang muling palakasin ang kanyang otoridad, inilunsad ni Mao ang tinawag niyang Cultural Revolution taong 1966. Layunin ng kilusang ito na linisin ang bansa mula sa tinuguriang mga empire o impure elements at buhayin ang revolusyonaryong diwa. Sinundan ito ng isang panahon ng matinding alitan sa pagitan ng mga radikal sa pangunguna ni Mao at ng mga pragmatiko na pinamunuan naman ni Liu at Deng Xiaoping. Nagdulot rin ito ng mahigit 1 milyong pagkasawi at maraming bahagi ng cultural heritage ng China ang nawasak. Taong 1967, nang nasa bingit na ng anarkiya ang maraming lungsod, ipinadala ni Mao ang hukbong militar upang muling ibalik ang kaayusan. Kasabay ng tagumpay ng kilos na ito ay unti-unti naman pagbagsak ng kanyang kalusugan. Ang kanyang mga huling taon ay minarkahan ng mga pagtatangkang itaguyod ang ugnayan ng China sa US, Japan at Europe. Namatay siya sa edad na 82 taong gulang noong 1976 matapos ang ilang mga atake sa puso. Sa kabila ng kanyang kamatayan, nananatili pa rin sa kapangyarihan ng CCP magpasa hanggang ngayon. Pinalakas pa ito ng kahalagahan ng partido sa kasalukuyan at hinigpitan ang mga kilusan laban sa kanila at iba pang mga itinuturing na banta sa kanilang paniniwala at pamamahala. Binigyan din rin ng partido ang kahalagahan ng kasalukuyang leader na si Xi Jinping sa lahat ng usapin. Ngunit nagbunsod ang mga ito ng pangamba na maaaring bumalik ang landas ng bansa sa mga sinimulang inisyatibo ni Mao. Ayon kay Daniel Bell na isang eksperto sa political theory sa University of Hong Kong, ang kasalukuyang landas na tinatahak ng China ay tugma sa isang Marxist thought na kabilang o kailangang dumaan ng isang bansa sa yugto ng kapitalismo upang mapaunlad ang ekonomiya bago magtransisyon sa komunismo. Matagal nang pinag-aaralan ng mga leader ng CCP ang pagbagsak ng Soviet Union at determinado silang pigilan ang isang katulad na kaganapan sa China. Magpapatuloy kaya ang Chinese Communist Party sa ika-100 anibersaryo ng pagkakatatag nito? Sapat kaya ang kanilang mga kasalukuyang polisiya? Sa ngayon, humaharap ang partido at bansa sa ilang mga bagong hamon ng tumatandang populasyon at bumabagal na pag-usad ng ekonomiya. Bukod pa rito, ang kanilang mga geopolitical na ambisyon ay naglalagay sa China sa isang alitan katapat ng ilang kalapit bansa.
台湾是中国的神圣领土，两岸人民血脉相连，血浓于水。我们要坚持一个中国原则和9·2共识，深化两岸经济文化交流合作，促进两岸同胞心灵契合。 坚决反对台独分裂活动，实现祖国完全统一。
Sa ika-75 taong anibersaryo ng pagtatatag ng People's Republic of China, pinangako ni President Xi Jinping na muling ipagkaisa ang Taiwan sa China. Ilang taon na ang nakalipas noong sinimulang palakasin ni Xi ang agresyon laban sa Taiwan, pati ang pagpapalakas ng presensya ng militar malapit rito. Ngunit sakaling magpasya ang China na salakayin ng Taiwan, malamang ay makaharap nito ang makapangyarihang bansa sa kasalukuyang panahon at yan ay ang Estados Unidos na maaring magtulak sa CCP sa bingit ng pagkawasak.
Sa iba pang mga balita, patay ang nasa 45 migrante sa Djibouti. Ito ay matapos sumubog ang 2 bangkang kanilang sinasakyan. Ayon sa mga otoridad ay mula Yemen ang 2 bangkang may sakay na 310 pasahero. Kasunod nito ay ang balitang lumubog ang mga bangka sa bahagi ng Red Sea malapit sa silangang Africa. Patuloy naman ngayon ang isinasagawang search and rescue para sa 61 pasaherong nawawala. Dagdag pa nila, aabot na sa 115 ang kanilang nasagip mula sa lumubog na mga bangka. Ipinasara ngayon ng Taiwan ang iba't ibang mga establishmento sa kanilang bansa bilang paghahanda sa paparating na bagyong Kraton. Kanselado ang higit sa 100 biyahe sa mga paliparan kasama na ang pagpapasara sa mga paaralan, opisina at mga palengke doon. Naiulat naman ang pagkasawi ng isang matandang lalaki mula sa matinding pag-ulan sa silangang Walin. Dagdag pa rito ang 70 kataong sugatan habang patuloy namang pinaghahanap ang 2 iba pa. Inilikas rin ang nasa higit sa 10,000 mga residente na malapit sa mga ilog at dagat sa silangan at katimugang bahagi ng Taiwan. Samantala, nagbabala naman ang mga opisyal sa mga residenteng manatili sa kanilang mga tahanan at lumayo muna sa mga dalampasigan.
Nasa mabuting lagay ang 3 mag-anak matapos makaiwas sa humaharurot na kotse sa Romania. Kita sa video na mabagal na naglalakad ang mag-asawa habang ipinapasyal ang kanilang anak na nasa stroller. Dito na biglang sumulpot ang humaharurot na itim na kotse sa daan. Dahil sa mabilis ang pagpapatakbo ng driver ng sasakyan, ay nawalan ito ng kontrol at bumangga sa isang kotse bago pa ito tumilapon at gumulong-gulong patungo sa sidewalk kung saan nakatayo ang mag-anak. Buti na lamang at mabilis ang reaksyon ng mag-asawa at tumabi agad sila sa isang gilid. Mapapansing itinaas ng tatay ang stroller bago mahagip ito ng isang bahagi ng kotse. Ayon sa lokal na ulat, nakatakas ang driver ng kotse at kasalukuyang pinaghahanap ng mga pulis.
Mapapanood sa kalangitan ng South America ang taunang total solar eclipse ngayong araw na Miyerkules. Yan po ay October 2. Ayon sa NASA, inaasahang matutunghayan ang tinatawag na Ring of Fire image na malilika mula sa eclipse. At batay po sa projection ng Space Agency, daraan ang annular eclipse sa Pacific at Atlantic Ocean, gayon din sa Antarctica. Bandang 12:50 p.m. Eastern Time magsisimula ang annular eclipse at magtatapos naman ito bandang 4:39 ng hapon Eastern Time. Pinayuhan naman ng NASA na magsuot ng eclipse glasses ang mga taong manonood ng celestial event para maingatan ang mga mata nila mula sa harmful solar rays.
Nako, ito, miyembro na po ng Philippine Navy Reserve Force ang 2-time Olympic gold medalist na si Carlos Yulo. Opisyal na nanumpa si Yulo bilang Petty Officer First Class noong Lunes sa headquarters ng Philippine Navy. Ayon sa Pinoy gymnast, proud siyang mabigyan ng naturang pribilehyo na ma-enlist sa Philippine Navy Reserve Force, isang pagkilala na hindi anya niya inaasahan. Saad pa ni Yulo na ikinagagalak niya ng may buong pagmamalaki ang pagsusuot ng uniforme ng Philippine Navy at pinasalamatan din niya ang Navy para sa prestihiyosong pagkilala. Sinabi naman ni Yulo na kanyang i-uphold ang core values ng Navy at magiging inspirasyon sa mga kabataan na ipakita sa pamamagitan ng sports, kaya rin nilang magsilbi sa ating bansa. Sa isang mensahe naman ay pinaabot ni Philippine Navy Flag Officer in Command Vice Admiral Toribio Adasi Jr. Kanyang pinuri ang Golden Boy at sinabing kumpiyansa siyang gagawin din ni Yulo bilang isang reservist ang ipinamalas niyang dedikasyon, disiplina at drive para maging kampiyon sa world stage kasama ang mga kababaihan at kalalakihan ng Philippine Navy na nag-aalay ng kinalambuhay para protektahan ang bansa. Matatandaan na naiuwi ni Yulo ang 2 medals sa floor exercise at vault apparatus sa gymnastics sa 2024 Paris Olympics.
Nahaharap po ngayon sa higit sa 100 panibagong kaso ng sexual assault ang rapper na si Sean Diddy Combs. Ayon sa abogado na si Tony Busby ay lumalabas na ang ilan sa mga biktima ni Combs ay mga menor de edad. Dagdag pa rito ay aabot naman sa 120 katao ang kabuuang bilang ng mga biktima na nagmula sa 25 estado sa Estados Unidos. Anya, nakababakala na maraming bilang ng mga bata ang biktima ng mga sexual na pang-aabuso mula sa mga pagtitipong isinagawa ni Combs. Binigyan diin ni Busby na mananagot din sa batas ang mga taong nakinabang at may kaugnayan sa nangyaring pang-aabuso. Iginiit naman ni Combs na walang katotohanan ang naturang bagong aligasyon ng mga pang-aabuso na bigong makapagpiyansa sa mga unang nakahaing kaso. Samantala, matatandaang nitong nakaraang linggo lamang nang arestuhin si Combs kasunod ng mga patong-patong na kaso ng sexual assault at sex trafficking.
Samantala, inanunsyo naman ang miyembro ng Blackpink na si Rosé na maglalabas siya ng full-length album na may pamagat na Rosie sa December 6. Makikita ngayon sa Instagram ni Rosé ang caption para sa bagong album na Where to Begin. I cannot believe I'm finally announcing my first album release to you all. Ibinahagi rin niya ang album ay may kaugnayan sa kanyang journal kung saan magiging tampok ang mga kanta na may kinalaman sa kanyang pamilya at mga kaibigan. Kabilang naman sa dapat abangan sa album na Rosie ang 12 mga bagong kanta na wala pang formal na pangalan ng mga tracklist. Dagdag pa rito ay naging bahagi rin si Rosé sa pagbuo at pagsulat ng mga kanta sa album na magpapakita sa mga personal na kaganapan sa kanyang buhay. Samantala, kinikilala rin si Rosé bilang global ambassador ng mga mamahaling brands gaya na lang ng Yves Saint Laurent, Puma at Tiffany & Company. Masaya namang ibinalita ng Cardiff Food Bank na nasa 900 na katao na ngayon ang nakatanggap ng tulong mula sa Taylor Swift donation. Tampok sa donasyon ang mga nakahandang emergency food packs para sa 925 katao. Matatandaan naman na nitong Hunyo lamang na magbigay ng tulong si Swift sa Cardiff matapos ng kanyang Eras Tour sa lugar. Ayon sa CEO ng Cardiff Food Bank na si Rachel Biggs, ay ipinagpapasalamat nila ang donasyon na ibinigay at ito ay isa sa mga hakbang para labanan ang matinding issue ng kahirapan sa mundo. Anya, ngayong taon ay nakabili sila ng mas maraming bilang ng pagkain para sa mga tao kumpara sa mayroon sila noong nakaraang taon. Samantala, nananatili pa ring pribado ang halaga na ibinigay ni Swift sa Cardiff bilang bahagi ng hiling nito para sa organisasyon.
At nagbukas na po ngayong araw ang kauna-unahang Nintendo Museum sa Japan na matatagpuan sa Kyoto. Makikita sa loob ng museum ang kasaysayan ng Nintendo kung saan bida ang mga interactive exhibits. Sa loob nito ay maaaring maglaro ang mga bisita ng Super Mario at Donkey Kong video games gamit ang isang malaking console. Tampok din dito ang mga unang modelo ng Nintendo gaming consoles na mula pa sa Famicom. Kasama rin sa mga ito ang mga unang produkto ng kumpanya kagaya na lamang po ng board games, baby strollers at copy machine. Dagdag pa rito ay nagbukas rin sila sa loob ng cafe shop at tindahan ng mga exclusive items ng Nintendo. Samantala, aabot sa $23 ang halaga ng ticket para sa adults na nauna nang naubos para sa buwan ng October at November. At narito po kami para maghatid ng balita saan mang dako ng mundo. Muli ako po, Ricky Matay.
Ako si Nina Richie Alago Flores. Ito ang Mata ng Agila International. Para naman sa mga balitang nangyari sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo, punta naman tayo kay Alma Angeles para sa Mata ng Agila World News. Take it away, Alma.
Thank you, Nina Enrique. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching NET25 World News. On tonight's headlines, tensions in the Middle East escalate. Iran launches a missile attack against Israel. An Israeli prime minister didn't mince words. He said Iran made a big mistake and would pay for it. Iran firing back, warning that if Israel tries anything, they'll face what they're calling vast destruction. The news starts now. You know how tensions have been high in the Middle East lately. We all know that. Well, things just got even more serious. Yesterday, Iran launched a missile attack against Israel, and now both countries are basically telling each other, don't even think about it. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu didn't mince words.
איראן עשתה הערב טעות גדולה, והיא תשלם על כך. המשטר באיראן לא מבין את נחישותנו להגן על עצמנו, ואת נחישותנו לגמול לאויבינו. סינואר ודף לא הבינו זאת, נסראללה ומוחסן לא הבינו זאת, וכנראה יש בטהרן אלה שלא מבינים זאת. הם יבינו. נעמוד בכלל שקבענו. מי שתוקף אותנו, אנחנו תוקפים אותו.
Iran fired right back, warning that if Israel tries anything, they'll face what they're calling vast destruction.
رژیم صهیونیستی که به دیوانگی رسیده کنترل نشه توسط امریکا و اروپا و بخواد چنین جنایت‌هایی رو ادامه بده و یا علیه حاکمیت و تمامیت ارضی ما وارد عمل بشه، عملیات امشب با چند برابر بزرگی تکرار خواهد شد و تمام زیرساخت‌های اونها مورد اصابت قرار خواهد گرفت.
Not exactly calming words from either side. Now, here's what went down. Iran fired more than 180 missiles at Israel, and now most of these were stopped before they could do any damage. Now, thanks to Israel's defense systems and some help from the U.S. Navy.
During the attack, the U.S. military coordinated closely with the Israeli Defense Forces to help defend Israel. U.S. Navy destroyers deployed to the Middle East region supported the defense of Israel by firing approximately a dozen interceptors against the incoming Iranian missiles.
But sadly, one person was killed in the West Bank. But thankfully, no other injuries were reported in Israel. Iran says they did this to get back at Israel for recent actions against militant leaders and fighting in Lebanon and Gaza. They're even bragging about using new hypersonic missiles for the first time. Now, the U.S. is standing firmly with Israel on this one.
The word fog of war was invented for a situation like this. This is a fluid situation. We will consult with the Israelis on next steps in terms of the response and how to deal with what Iran has just done, and we will continue to monitor for further threats and attacks from Iran and its proxies.
President Biden called Iran's attack ineffective, and American warships actually helped shoot down some of those missiles.
At my direction, the United States military actively supported the defense of Israel, and we're still assessing the impact. But based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective.
Israel's UN ambassador is promising a painful response to Iran.
We will defend our people. We will act. Iran will soon feel the consequences of their actions. The response will be painful.
So it looks like this isn't over yet. The UN Security Council is rushing to set up a meeting for tomorrow, and the European Union is trying to calm things down by calling for everyone to stop fighting. But with Israel's recent moves in Lebanon and the ongoing situation in Gaza, there is real worry this could turn into an even bigger conflict.
This war is only going to inflame the region further and might cause major havoc and more suffering for the civilian population in the region who had enough with wars, and particularly the Lebanese and the Palestinians who have been. The Lebanese still haven't recovered for the trauma of the civil war, and intermittent invasions by Israel.
As tensions escalate in the Middle East, U.S. leaders are weighing in with differing perspectives. Vice President Kamala Harris took a firm stance on Iran.
We will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend U.S. forces and interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists. And we will continue to work with our allies and partners to disrupt Iran's aggressive behavior and hold them accountable.
But what about former President Trump? He offered a different take, suggesting a more hands-off approach Trump also referenced his administration's diplomatic achievement, the Abraham Accords. Could this peace initiative have changed the current situation? Now, just for context,
this has really been bad, but they have to finish that process. However it turns out, they have to finish the process. This is a little bit like two kids fighting in the schoolyard. Sometimes you have to just sort of let it go a little bit, and we'll see what happens. But it's a horrible, horrible war. And then you see what's happening even today. You know, where is that going to stop? And, you know, you have to give Israel a lot of credit for being able to protect itself. You look at these forces, they shot down almost 200 rockets today. But this is not the way anybody should have to live. So we're going to obviously be very involved in the Middle East. This would have never happened. We did the Abraham Accords. I think everybody, including Iran, would have been in the Abraham Accords had I taken over as president. I think even Iran would have been in the Abraham Accords ultimately. It would have been great for everybody, and you would have had peace in the Middle East.
But what about former President Trump? He offered a different take, suggesting a more hands-off approach. Trump also referenced his administration's diplomatic achievement, the Abraham Accords. Could this peace initiative have changed the current situation? Now, just for context, the Abraham Accords were historic diplomatic agreements signed back in 2020 between Israel and several Arab nations, including the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. These groundbreaking deals mark the first public normalization of relations between Arab countries and Israel in decades. The agreements aim to establish diplomatic, economic, and cultural ties between Israel and these Arab nations, representing a significant shift in Middle East dynamics. The accords were notable for bypassing the traditional approach of solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict first, instead focusing on building regional cooperation around shared interests like technology, trade, and security concerns about Iran. While celebrated as a diplomatic breakthrough, could these agreements have sidelined Palestinian concerns? The two U.S. vice presidential candidates met Tuesday night in their only political debate in this year's election. The two-hour debate gave viewers a glimpse of Donald Trump's running mate J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris' vice presidential pick, Tim Walz. Thomas I. Likeness for more.
Polite, cordial, and policy-heavy. That sums up the debate between the two vice presidential candidates, Democrat Tim Walz and Republican J.D. Vance. There was no inflammatory rhetoric, no personal insults, as the two verbally clashed on questions debate moderators peppered them with. The opener focused on foreign policy and the Middle East. Tim Walz took aim at Trump.
When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed.
The issue moved on to housing, where Vance blamed immigrants for the high costs, a theme he continued with throughout the two-hour debate.
In Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed, you've got hospitals that are overwhelmed, you've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border.
Vance also blamed Harris for many of the country's problems, saying she's done nothing as vice president. The sharpest exchange between the two came when Vance dodged a question on whether he believed Trump lost the 2020 election.
And I think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer.
On the issue of gun control, Vance says it's not possible to take guns out of the hands of the bad guys to avoid school shootings. He says instead, schools should be better fortified, have stronger doors and windows, and more school resource officers. Walz says that's just not the answer.
Do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix.
This is the last chance both parties had to make a pitch to voters in a debate platform. Trump has refused a second debate with Harris, and only one vice presidential debate had been scheduled. In just over a month, voters will go to the polls. Advance voting has already begun in a number of states.
They did argue with each other, but it was in that sort of Midwestern way, or, it almost felt like a debate out of 1988 or 1984, where they were politely disagreeing, and they definitely had some contrast, but there weren't fireworks. This was almost like a pre-Trump era debate where both candidates were able to kind of use their skills in ways that were, disagreeable, but not sort of performance as much. I don't think that Vance's performance really helps Trump or hurts Trump, actually. I felt like I think it marginally helps Vance, but it's not going to do much for Trump, because Trump, people will remember Trump's debate performance. If he doesn't do a new one, it's going to be hard to get away from that. And then there's just not going to be an opportunity for the candidates to talk to each other at the top of the ticket.
Thomas I. Likeness, NET25 World News.
Now, Thomas I. Likeness joins us now. Thomas, what's your take on last night's debate? How do you think it landed with viewers?
Well, first, Alma, the debate focused on policy, not name-calling, not personal insults. It was actually very civilized, and for many viewers, they might have found that boring. It's hard to say how many people stayed with it until the end. The ratings numbers are not out yet. But for that small group of people who are undecided, the ones who say, I just don't have enough information about policy, this debate may have helped them make up their minds. Tim Walz was long on policy details. Now, he was less polished than Vance, but he comes across as a nice guy, the kind of person you'd maybe like to have as a neighbor, very folksy and long on details. Now, Vance, he was a toned-down version of himself. He's dropped the fiery rhetoric that he uses on the campaign trail, but he offered little in terms of policy. His answers to a lot of questions tended to blame immigrants for many of America's problems. He also blamed Kamala Harris for doing nothing in the last 3.5 years, even though she isn't the president. She's only the vice president. And he vigorously defended Trump. But in a way, he made Trump's policies seem a little more palatable. But, I think when it comes to marking a ballot, when you're in that voting booth by yourself, nobody watching, I think people are less focused on policy and more on who they can relate to. But again, what we saw on Tuesday night was the undercard. The real political fistfight is between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Alma?
Well, tonight's vice presidential debate might seem less crucial to some viewers, but historically, the role of vice president has proven to be far more than just ceremonial. In fact, throughout U.S. history, several have had to take over as president. Can you walk us through this history, Thomas?
Very good question, Alma. So let's give our viewers a bit of a history lesson. Since 1776, when the U.S. came into existence, there have been 46 presidents, and on 9 occasions, the vice president ended up completing the term of the sitting president. I've seen it happen twice in my lifetime. Now, 4 of those occasions, sadly, were because of assassinations, and the last time that happened was in 1963, and that's when Lyndon Johnson completed the term of John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated during a visit to Dallas, Texas. On 4 other occasions, the sitting president succumbed to illness. And on the 9th occasion, it was 50 years ago in 1974, I was living in the United States at the time and actually working that night, Richard Nixon resigned in disgrace. Gerald Ford took his place in the big chair. So nearly 20% of presidential administrations in The U.S. have been completed by the vice president, so I guess it's a 1 in 5 chance. One other circumstance, though, that the vice president could end up in the big chair is if the 25th constitutional amendment is invoked. A president can be removed if he's unable to complete his term due to illness or mental impairment. Elma?
Thank you, Thomas. It's clear that voters have a critical choice ahead of them. Thank you, Thomas. And the news continues here on NET25 World News. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Papalapit na ang weekend, ibig sabihin it's again a new episode of Corina Interviews. Sa mga batang 90s dyan, o ayan, tumutok na kayo dahil I'm sure minsan na rin kayong naging fangirl at fanboy sa mag-asawang legend na si Mikey Cojuangco at Dodot Jaworski. Sino ba naman ang makakalimot sa mga inuwing karangalan ni Mikey sa ating bansa? Bilang gold medalist sa Asian Games noong 2002. Siyempre, ang anak ng nag-iisang living legend, former senator and star basketball player Robert Jaworski. Si Dodot Jaworski hindi rin nagpatalo sa larangan ng basketball at sa politika. Paano sila nagkainlaban? Ano ang tunay na bersyon? He said or she said? Lahat ng yan at iba pa. Dito lang sa Corina Interviews, 6 p.m. pagkatapos ng comedy series The Goodwill sa NET25.
Sa NET25.
Welcome back to NET25 World News. Search and rescue teams in western North Carolina are on the front lines, tirelessly scouring the mountains for survivors as they navigate through washed-out roads, destroyed bridges, and downed power lines in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. The storm has claimed at least 162 lives across multiple states, including North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, and Virginia. Authorities warned that the death toll could rise as rescue teams reach isolated communities and communication systems are restored. In Macomb County, the number of confirmed fatalities jumped from 40 to 57 just yesterday, and the county seat, Asheville, has been particularly hard hit, suffering significant damage.
It's unbelievable. I mean, you can't adequately describe it in words. It's we've never seen anything like this here in Asheville. It's unprecedented. We have damage to our transportation, just roads buckled and collapsed, and bridges gone, parts of bridges gone, places that are now inaccessible. You know, the kinds of projects that would normally take months or years to complete, we have all of a sudden multiple projects like that that all need to get done. I have seen our community at its best in this situation. People are amazing how they have come together and they've checked on their neighbors. When I hiked out of my house, I was able to reach my mom, and her neighbors had already checked on her. They had already brought her some water. We're seeing that all over our community, and the volunteers who themselves have experienced the storm are out there helping folks. It's unbelievable. It's heartwarming.
Secretary Mayorkas described the recovery efforts as a multi-billion-dollar undertaking that will take years to complete. President Joe Biden has committed to accelerating the recovery process.
I've been in frequent contact with the governors and other leaders in the impacted areas, and we have to jumpstart this recovery process. People are scared to death. People wonder whether they're going to make it. We still haven't heard from a whole lot of people. This is urgent. People have to know how to get the information they need. So we'll be there until this work is done. It's going to cost, I predict to you, I don't have a number. I think it's going to cost billions of dollars.
A monster storm is churning through the Western Pacific, leaving chaos in its wake and threatening millions more. Super Typhoon Krathon has already battered the northern Philippines and is now taking aim at Taiwan. And just how dangerous is this storm? In the Philippine province of Batanes, residents got a frightening preview of Krathon's power. Take a look at this dramatic footage from Monday. Winds of up to 215 kilometers per hour. That's 134 miles per hour. whip through the region, strong enough to tear roofs off buildings and uproot trees. But for the Philippines, this was just a close call. The typhoon passed near the northern tip of Luzon without making landfall. Now, Taiwan is bracing for a direct hit. In the port city of Kaohsiung, home to 2.7 million people, the memories of a deadly 1977 typhoon are still fresh, and officials aren't taking any chances. City officials have suspended public transportation and are urging residents to stay away from the sea, rivers, and mountains.
对台风假，然后小朋友还蛮喜欢玩雨水的，对，就让他们亲近一下也没关系。
现在风雨状况怎么样？
还好。
会担心之后会变大？
可能晚一点会变大。对，照上一次的案例来说的话，应该是。
The warning is clear: stay home and stay safe. Now, while Grathon has weakened slightly, meteorologists warn the dangers is far from over. The slow-moving storm threatens Taiwan with a potentially catastrophic combination: a dangerous storm surge, damaging winds, and flooding rainfall. For a region that sees an average of 20 tropical storms each year, Grathon is proving to be anything but average. And we should note, the Philippines gives its own names to typhoon. So here, this storm is known as Julian or Julian. 75 years of communist rule in China. But where are all the celebrations? What should have been a massive display of China's power turned out to be surprisingly low-key. So what's behind this unexpected shift? Now, yesterday marks 3/4 of a century since Mao Zedong declared the birth of modern China. But instead of the grand parades and festivities we've come to expect, we saw only modest flag-raising ceremonies. Now, why such restraint from a nation known for its spectacular displays? The answer might lie in President Xi Jinping's recent speech. Now, his choice of words, he said, the road ahead will not be easy, with difficulties and obstacles, and we may face major tests such as high winds and rough seas. Not exactly party language, is it? So what's really going on in the world's second largest economy? Remember when China was the poster child for economic growth? Now those days seem increasingly distant. Now the country is grappling with a property crisis, struggling to meet growth targets, and facing the aftermath of strict zero-COVID policies. Could this economic uncertainty be behind the muted celebrations? Just last week, China announced a new stimulus package. While markets initially cheered, sending stocks to their biggest single-day gain in 16 years, the question remains, will it be enough to turn things around? And what about Taiwan? President Xi Jinping used this anniversary to once again claim the island as China's sacred territory.
台湾是中国的神圣领土，两岸人民血脉相连，血浓于水。我们要坚持一个中国原则和9·2共识，深化两岸经济文化交流合作，促进两岸同胞心灵契合，坚决反对台独分裂活动，实现祖国完全统一。
With tensions already high in the region, how might this affect China's international relationships? And as China steps into its 76th year under communist rule, one thing is clear: the nation faces challenges that even its powerful leader acknowledges. The question now is, how will China navigate these high winds and rough seas ahead? A bold proposal from Japan's new leader is raising eyebrows across Asia. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is suggesting what some are calling an Asian NATO. But what exactly does that mean, and why is it controversial? Ishiba, who took office today at age 67, isn't wasting any time addressing what he sees as growing security threats in the region. In his first hours as Prime Minister, he is already signaling a significant shift in Japan's defense strategy. But it's
我が国を取り巻く安全保障環境は戦後最も厳しいものだと認識をいたしております。国家安全保障戦略に基づき、平和を守るための抑止力の強化、 防衛力の抜本強化に取り組んでまいります。
His proposal for an Asian version of NATO that's drawing the most attention. This collective security alliance, similar to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO, would be aimed at deterring China's growing influence in the region. And the idea is already facing pushback. A senior U.S. official has dismissed it as premature, and analysts say it could provoke an angry response from Beijing. Despite potential controversy, Ishiba seems determined to reshape Japan's diplomatic landscape.
現実的な国益を踏まえました外交によりまして、日米同盟を基軸に友好国、同志国の輪を広げ、外交力、防衛力の両輪で我が国の平和、地域の安定を実現いたしてまいります。
The new prime minister faces multiple challenges at home too, from political scandals to rising living costs. But it's his vision of an Asian NATO that could define his leadership on the global stage. Now, for context again, NATO was formed after World War II as a military alliance between North American and European countries. An Asian version would potentially link countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, and others in a similar defensive pact. The question now, can Ishiba navigate the diplomatic minefield his proposal has created? And how will China respond to what it's likely to see a direct challenge? A massive show of force in the skies over Seoul today, but what's behind South Korea's biggest military parade in years? Take a look. A political storm in South Korea. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.
This